Tensions in the Persian Gulf are escalating at an unprecedented pace. In a dramatic confrontation that has alarmed military planners and diplomats alike, U.S. forces shot down an Iranian drone near the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier strike group. This marks the second major incident in just 1 week after Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps IRGC gunboats attempted to board an American commercial vessel near the Strait of Hormuz. Each of these incidents pushes the world perilously closer to direct military confrontation between the United States and Iran, raising fears of a broader Middle East conflict. Welcome back to Solando Opinion. Thank you for joining me. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss any updates on this rapidly evolving story. The situation in the Persian Gulf is tense, complex, and extremely dangerous. Every movement by naval forces, drones, and aircraft is being scrutinized by analysts worldwide, as any miscalculation could trigger a full-scale war. Let's start with the drone incident. On Monday, U.S. naval forces identified an Iranian unmanned aerial vehicle approaching the USS Abraham Lincoln, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Despite repeated warnings and attempts to divert the drone, it continued on a direct course toward the carrier. Acting in accordance with established rules of engagement, U.S. F-A-18 fighters intercepted and destroyed the drone before it could pose a threat. Military sources confirmed that this was the second time in the past week U.S. forces had neutralized an Iranian drone in international waters, signaling Iran's willingness to test American defensive capabilities. Simultaneously, the IRGC deployed multiple fast attack gunboats, maneuvering aggressively near a U.S.-flagged commercial vessel transiting the Strait of Hormuz. These boats attempted to board the vessel, a clear escalation designed to challenge American freedom of navigation operations in one of the world's most strategically vital choke points. U.S. Navy destroyers were forced to intervene, creating a tense standoff in which the Iranian boats eventually retreated. While no shots were fired during this incident, the aggression signals a heightened willingness on Tehran's part to engage militarily if provoked. The context for these actions cannot be understated. The Persian Gulf is home to roughly 20% of the world's oil exports. Any disruption to shipping through the Strait of Hormuz has immediate and global economic consequences. Analysts warn that even a minor confrontation could trigger oil price spikes of $100 to $150 per barrel, with cascading effects on global markets, inflation, and energy security. Beyond economic factors, the situation carries the constant risk of miscalculation. A single misinterpreted move by either side could escalate into full-scale conflict. The presence of the USS Abraham Lincoln strike group, along with accompanying B-52 bombers, guided missile destroyers, and amphibious assault ships, represents the most significant U.S. military deployment in the region in over a decade. Satellite imagery has confirmed the positioning of U.S. Ospreys at Duqm Airport in Oman, providing additional air support and rapid response capabilities. Military planners describe this deployment as a clear and unmistakable message to Tehran. Any hostile actions against U.S. personnel, vessels, or allies will be met with overwhelming force. Iran, however, is signaling that it is prepared for a potential escalation. Statements from IRGC leadership indicate that these aggressive maneuvers are not isolated incidents, but part of a broader strategy to assert dominance and demonstrate the capability to disrupt U.S. operations. Ali Shamkhani, a senior advisor to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, publicly stated that Iran is ready for all contingencies and warned that any U.S. strikes would be met with retaliatory measures targeting American interests across the region. This rhetoric underscores the high stakes of the current confrontation. The timing of these incidents is particularly sensitive. Diplomatic efforts to address Iran's nuclear program, missile development, and regional proxy networks are ongoing, with U.S. negotiators in frequent consultation with European and Middle Eastern partners. The simultaneous escalation in the Gulf complicates these efforts, as military actions often reduce the room for diplomacy and increase the risk of miscommunication. Analysts worry that Iran's hardline elements may be deliberately provoking the U.S. to influence ongoing negotiations or demonstrate leverage to regional allies. To understand the full implications, it's important to consider Iran's military capabilities. The IRGC maintains one of the most sophisticated missile arsenals in the Middle East, with thousands of short and medium-range ballistic missiles capable of striking Israel, Saudi Arabia, and U.S. bases throughout the region. These capabilities are complemented by an extensive network of proxy militias, including Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthi forces in Yemen, and various Iraqi factions. These groups provide Tehran with a layer of strategic depth, allowing it to project power indirectly while maintaining plausible deniability. The U.S., for its part, is maintaining a posture of deterrence rather than immediate aggression. While the destruction of the Iranian drone demonstrates military readiness, U.S. officials stress that the primary goal is to prevent miscalculations and protect freedom of navigation rather than provoke a war. Pentagon spokespersons have emphasized that rules of engagement are designed to balance security with de-escalation, but they acknowledge that the situation remains extremely volatile. Economic considerations further complicate the scenario. The Gulf region is vital to global energy markets, and any disruption could have immediate effects on oil and gas prices worldwide. Traders are already reacting to the news, with futures in Brent and WTI crude spiking in response to the drone shootdown and gunboat incidents. Global supply chains, particularly in Asia and Europe, are under pressure, and governments are closely monitoring the potential for cascading effects in energy markets. Beyond economics, there is also a human element to consider. Tens of thousands of U.S. and allied personnel are stationed in the region, from naval crews aboard carriers to special operations units on land. Civilian shipping operators and oil workers are operating under heightened threat levels, and international organizations have issued warnings about potential escalation. Any misstep could put thousands of lives at risk, not just in military context, but also among civilian populations in strategic choke points and conflict-prone areas. Analysts are divided on Iran's motives. Some argue that Tehran is testing the limits of U.S. tolerance and military response to assert regional dominance and deter future interventions. Others suggest that internal political dynamics, including tensions between moderate and hardline factions, may be driving aggressive actions designed to consolidate influence domestically. Either way, the pattern of drone incursions and aggressive maneuvers indicates a calculated strategy to project power without triggering outright war, though the risk remains significant. The political implications in Washington are also profound. Congress has received briefings on the incidents, and lawmakers are demanding clarity on the rules of engagement, military objectives, and potential consequences. President Trump's administration has positioned itself as resolute, emphasizing that U.S. forces will act decisively to protect interests and personnel. Meanwhile, diplomatic channels remain active, with U.S. envoys consulting with Gulf states, European allies, and international organizations to prevent escalation and maintain communication with Tehran. This standoff is occurring against a backdrop of ongoing nuclear tensions. Iran continues to enrich uranium at levels approaching weapons-grade thresholds, and its missile development program remains a central concern for regional security. Any military confrontation risks destabilizing efforts to negotiate limitations on these programs, and international observers worry that an escalation could trigger a broader arms race in the region. Social and media reactions are intense. International news outlets have amplified the threat narrative, emphasizing the possibility of a regional war. Analysts warn that media framing can affect public perception, potentially pressuring leaders to act decisively even in situations where restraint might be preferable. Social media platforms are flooded with speculation, visualizations of potential attacks, and commentary from military experts, amplifying public anxiety worldwide. There is also the possibility of indirect conflict. Proxy forces aligned with Iran are likely to respond to U.S. actions, potentially targeting Israeli, Saudi, or U.S. assets in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon. This creates a complex web of risk where localized incidents could quickly spiral into broader hostilities, drawing in multiple actors and complicating diplomatic efforts to prevent war. Experts are weighing potential outcomes. Some suggest that the situation could stabilize if both sides recognize the high stakes and pursue restraint, coupled with intensified diplomatic engagement. Others warn that repeated provocations, miscommunications, or aggressive maneuvers could trigger unintended escalation, making the region a tinderbox for conflict. Military planners emphasize that even a minor miscalculation could lead to a chain reaction that is difficult to control. Meanwhile, U.S. allies in the region are closely monitoring events. Countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar are invested in preventing escalation that could threaten oil exports, infrastructure, and regional stability. Diplomatic communications are reportedly ongoing behind the scenes, with leaders pressing both Washington and Tehran to exercise restraint while maintaining strategic readiness. From a military perspective, the U.S. has multiple options for response beyond the defensive measures already taken. These include additional air patrols, electronic warfare measures, targeted strikes against IRGC assets if provoked, and coordinated naval maneuvers to maintain freedom of navigation. Each option carries risks, particularly the potential for escalation and collateral damage, making decision-making extraordinarily complex. Iran's approach, in contrast, appears to combine conventional and asymmetric strategies. By using drones, gunboats, and proxy forces, Tehran can project power, intimidate adversaries, and signal resolve without committing to full-scale war. However, this strategy is inherently risky, as the U.S. response could be misinterpreted, potentially triggering a military spiral neither side desires. Economic, military, political, and humanitarian considerations converge to make this the most precarious moment in the Persian Gulf in decades. Analysts warn that without careful management, the next miscalculation could have consequences not only for the U.S. and Iran, but for global energy markets, regional stability, and international security frameworks. The next 48 to 72 hours are critical. U.S. naval forces remain on high alert, monitoring Iranian movements, drone activity, and communications. Intelligence assets are working around the clock to assess threats, anticipate Iranian actions, and provide decision-makers with accurate, real-time information. Diplomatic channels remain open, though the likelihood of de-escalation depends on both sides' willingness to exercise restraint while avoiding any perception of weakness. For Americans and global observers, this situation is a reminder of how fragile peace can be in geopolitically sensitive regions. The presence of highly capable military forces, nuclear-capable states, and complex alliances creates an environment where even minor incidents carry outsized consequences. The downing of a drone and attempted boarding of a U.S. vessel are not isolated events. They are potential catalysts for larger conflict. At this moment, the U.S. military maintains a defensive posture while signaling readiness to act decisively if necessary. Iranian forces continue to demonstrate capability and resolve, testing the limits of U.S. patience. Meanwhile, the world watches as two of the most militarily capable actors in the Middle East engage in a dangerous game of brinkmanship, where miscalculation could spark a war with regional and global ramifications. In conclusion, the shoot-down of the Iranian drone and the IRGC gunboat incident represent more than just tactical engagements. They are emblematic of a larger strategic standoff. Both sides are operating under intense pressure, with domestic, regional, and global audiences watching closely. The risk of escalation is real, and the potential consequences for regional stability, global markets, and human lives are profound. Stay tuned. We will continue to bring updates as this story develops. Please like, share, and subscribe to stay informed on the latest developments in this rapidly evolving international crisis. This is not just another news story. It is a potential turning point in the Middle East, and the next few days could determine whether diplomacy prevails or the world inches closer to war.